The Nile flowed silently under the early morning sky, its waters shimmering like molten gold in the rising sun. Mist hovered above the riverbank, curling around reeds and mud brick homes, carrying whispers of lives long past. If you listened closely, some say you could hear the echoes of footsteps, the laughter of children, and the hushed conversations of those whose names have been all but forgotten. 4,000 years ago, this river was more than a lifeline, it was the thread that wove together a civilization teetering between survival and grandeur, between fear and reverence, between the known and the unknowable. Imagine standing on the banks of the Nile, the same soil beneath your feet that supported generations of farmers, fishermen, and laborers. The air is thick with the scent of clay and river mud, mingling with smoke from hearths as the first flames of the day are lit. The river's surface reflects the sky in soft, broken patterns, masking the dangers hidden beneath, sudden whirlpools, lurking crocodiles, or the invisible currents that could drag a careless foot into a fatal embrace. Life here was fragile, precarious, and yet astonishingly rich in ritual and routine. In the distance, the silhouettes of early mud brick dwellings rise along the floodplain. Within those walls, a baker kneads dough with a rhythmic devotion, unaware of the grand pharaoh whose palace towers miles away, casting shadows over the very people who feed his court. A child stumbles through the courtyard of a fisher's home, laughing as a mother scolds softly, her voice carrying the weight of countless generations. Every ordinary action, every daily chore, every whispered prayer, is both intimate and vital, a small spark of life illuminated against the backdrop of an ancient civilization that would one day capture the imagination of the world. And yet, beneath this veneer of ordinary existence, mysteries quietly linger. The walls of homes and temples are silent witnesses to whispered secrets, hidden passions, and deeds that will never see the light of day. Some say the air itself holds the memory of tragedies, the laborers crushed under the weight of massive stones, the stolen treasures smuggled under the cover of darkness, the jealous rivalries that festered behind closed doors. Every corner of this world has a story waiting, a story that demands to be heard, even if it takes centuries for someone to listen. Consider the craftsman who carves symbols into clay tablets, each stroke a record of his life and faith. His hands are worn, scarred by repetitive labor, yet he works with meticulous care. What drives him to persist? Is it devotion, fear, or the hope that long after his body returns to dust, his mark on the world will endure? Across the Nile, a priest arranges offerings in a temple, murmuring prayers to gods whose faces are carved in stone, eyes forever watching. He, too, has secrets, knowledge of rituals so complex that even the king might hesitate to understand them fully. And somewhere between the riverbank and the temple, ordinary citizens navigate a labyrinth of power, superstition, and survival, each step carefully measured against forces they can barely comprehend. This is a world suspended between light and shadow, a place where every moment is ordinary, yet every moment teeters on the edge of something extraordinary. And as we peer into this ancient civilization, one question persists: beneath the beauty, the grandeur, and the daily toil, what truths remain hidden? What stories have been buried beneath centuries of sand and stone, waiting for the brave, or the curious, to uncover them? It is here, on the banks of the Nile, where our journey begins, a journey not just through the marvels of an ancient civilization, but into the very hearts and minds of those who lived, loved, and labored here. Secrets linger in the soil, in the whispers of the wind, and in the shadows cast by mud brick homes. Secrets that, once revealed, will challenge everything we thought we knew about life 4,000 years ago. Beneath the grandeur and the sunlit serenity of the Nile, a hidden world waits, and it is a world filled with both wonder and peril. Beyond the towering walls of the pharaoh's palace, the world of the Nile pulses with life, far removed from the splendor of gold and ceremony, yet equally complex and vital. Mud brick homes cluster along winding streets, their flat roofs catching the sun's first light, and courtyards filled with the laughter of children. Here, life is raw and tangible, sweat on laboring brows, the scent of freshly baked bread, the low hum of prayers whispered to gods both familiar and fearsome. Each day is a delicate balance between survival and aspiration, a rhythm dictated by the river's flooding, the heat of the sun, and the whims of a world ruled from distant palaces. Take, for example, the bricklayer laboring along the banks of the Nile. His hands are calloused and scarred, muscles taut with repetitive motion, yet he moves with a quiet dignity. Each brick he shapes is more than clay, it is a small contribution to monuments he will never see completed, to walls that may one day house the elite whose lives seem so far removed from his own. There is pride in his work, but also anxiety. Illness, accidents, or arbitrary punishment could undo years of labor in a single day. And yet, he endures, guided by a mixture of faith, necessity, and a faint hope that his toil might be remembered in some fragment of time. A few streets away, a weaver threads intricate patterns into linen, her fingers nimble despite the repetitive strain. She murmurs prayers to the goddess Hathor, hoping for protection from the common threats that stalk daily life, disease, theft, and the sudden misfortune that so often claims the unprepared. She is deeply aware of the hidden hierarchy of her village, which families wield influence, which men might exploit her labor, which neighbors hide grudges behind polite smiles. Her work sustains her family and contributes to the broader economy of Egypt, yet it is performed in relative obscurity. Few will know her name, and fewer still will recall her patterns, but her skill and perseverance are the invisible threads holding the fabric of society together. Fishermen cast their nets into the flowing Nile, watching the water swirl as the river offers its bounty with both generosity and danger. Crocodiles lurk beneath the surface, capable of pulling the unwary into sudden death, while swift currents can turn a routine catch into a tragedy. Children play along the banks, their laughter echoing like bells, but the adults maintain an ever-present vigilance. In this world, life is fragile, fortune can shift in an instant. Yet amidst uncertainty, there is resilience. Communities gather for festivals, sharing food, music, and stories, moments where joy and fear coexist, fleeting but essential to the human spirit. Even in their ordinary routines, ordinary Egyptians are not immune to the intrigues of the palace. Word travels along the Nile like whispered currents, carrying rumors of favor and disfavor, new decrees and rising tensions. A scribe may mention a tax increase, a pharaoh's illness, or a mysterious disappearance, and suddenly the daily tasks of common life are intertwined with forces far beyond comprehension. One wrong step, one misinterpreted word, could bring ruin not just to an individual but to an entire family. Their lives, humble as they may seem, are linked to the hidden dramas of power, ambition, and betrayal unfolding in distant corridors of gold and stone. Families, too, navigate their own private challenges. A mother rises before sunrise, kneading dough and preparing meals while comforting children who are frightened of the night and the unknown. She negotiates with her husband over scarce resources, ensuring the household survives while also nurturing hopes for the future. Elders share tales of gods, heroes, and ancestors, teaching lessons of morality and caution. Yet even these domestic moments are tinged with tension. Threats of famine, disease, and social instability linger at the edges of their consciousness, unseen but ever-present, shaping every decision and every conversation. Religious rituals permeate daily life, often blurring the lines between the ordinary and the mystical. Families offer small sacrifices to household gods, praying for protection, health, and prosperity. They light fires to ward off evil spirits and recite incantations taught by elders. Children learn from a young age that misfortune is never random, it is a sign, a message, a warning. Superstition and faith intertwine seamlessly with practicality. A farmer respects the flooding of the Nile as both a divine blessing and an agricultural necessity. Even routine tasks carry symbolic weight, every step a subtle acknowledgement of forces beyond human control. Amidst this rhythm of labor and ritual, community dynamics are complex and layered. Villagers rely on one another for survival, forming networks of trust and obligation. Yet beneath the cooperation lies rivalry, envy, and unspoken tension. Land disputes simmer quietly, grievances fester, and sometimes tempers erupt violently. In the marketplaces, vendors exchange goods while simultaneously gauging alliances, observing which families have fallen out of favor or gained influence. Every smile, every transaction, carries nuance, and one must navigate the social landscape as carefully as the physical terrain of the Nile. And then there is the ever-present reminder of mortality. Disease, injury, and the harshness of labor claim lives unpredictably. Funerals are both somber ceremonies and cautionary tales, teaching the living to respect tradition, to value community, and to remember that even ordinary lives, no matter how humble, are fleeting. Tombs built for commoners are modest compared to the grand pyramids, but they carry the same desire, to be remembered, to leave a mark, to assert that life, no matter how ordinary, had meaning. As the sun begins to set, bathing the village in golden light, ordinary Egyptians pause to reflect, even if only briefly. A child clutches a small figurine, believing it will protect her in dreams. A farmer leans on his hoe, imagining a harvest that may or may not come. And somewhere along the river, a fisherman returns with a catch, his boat laden with sustenance for his family but also with stories that may never leave his lips. Each life, each action, seems inconsequential in isolation, yet together they form the beating heart of a civilization. And so, as night falls over the Nile, the ordinary and extraordinary coexist. While the pharaoh's palace hums with intrigue and hidden schemes, the villages along the river carry on, unaware of the forces that will soon touch their lives. But even in the most humble corners, secrets wait. Perhaps it is in the quiet labor of the bricklayer, the careful weaving of cloth, or the whispered prayers of a mother that we find traces of the larger drama, threads connecting the lives of the ordinary to the ambitions, fears, and schemes of the powerful. What seems mundane may hide a story of courage, resilience, and even quiet rebellion, a story that history seldom records but that survives in echoes along the riverbanks, waiting for us to uncover it. The Nile is both a giver and a guardian, its flowing waters threading through the lives of every Egyptian, ordinary and elite alike. By day, the river hums with activity, boats glide silently with their burdens of grain and fish, children splash along the banks, and farmers toil tirelessly, planting and harvesting according to rhythms dictated not by clocks, but by the rising and falling of the river. Yet beneath the surface of this everyday bustle lies a world brimming with rituals and hidden meaning, practices that seem ordinary but conceal secrets known only to those who dared to understand them. Each morning begins with a ritual as vital as any labor, the offering of prayers and small gifts to household gods. Families bow before tiny statues, placing bread, oil, or a carefully prepared figurine at their feet. These acts of devotion are more than piety, they are survival, a protective measure against forces unseen and potentially malevolent. Parents whisper instructions to their children, teaching them which gods favor which acts, which gestures attract protection, and which careless movements could invite misfortune. Every gesture carries weight, every omission could ripple unseen consequences across days, weeks, or even lifetimes. In temples, ritual takes on a far grander scale, blending the spiritual and political in a spectacle that both inspires awe and demands obedience. Priests clad in linen robes move with precision, chanting prayers in tones that resonate through stone halls. Offerings of incense, food, and precious oils are presented to gods whose names have been carved in permanence upon walls. The pharaoh, regarded as both sovereign and divine, participates in these ceremonies, yet even he must adhere to the protocols meticulously. One wrong step, one mispronounced syllable, and the entire ritual could be considered a failure, a sign that the gods themselves are displeased. Fear and devotion intertwine, creating a tension that is almost palpable in the air. Even the mundane tasks of life are imbued with symbolic significance. The act of planting a seed is both literal and spiritual, a prayer that sustains families and honors deities. The rising floodwaters of the Nile are interpreted as messages from the gods, offering blessings or warnings depending on their timing and strength. Craftsmen carve intricate symbols into bricks and tools, embedding protective charms and blessings into objects intended for everyday use. No action is truly trivial, for in a world where superstition and faith are inseparable from reality, every choice carries potential consequence. Yet for all its order, daily life is threaded with uncertainty. Illnesses emerge without warning, and remedies are as mysterious as the world itself. Some diseases are attributed to malevolent spirits, others to the wrath of offended gods. The healer or priest who claims the knowledge to cure these afflictions holds enormous influence, sometimes as much power as a minor official in the palace. Their advice is sought carefully, for even the smallest mistake can be deadly. Families often hedge their bets with multiple rituals, potions, and charms, blending practicality with mysticism in an attempt to wrest control from forces they cannot fully understand. The Nile itself holds secrets. At night, its waters seem to whisper, shifting in ways that have sparked fear and reverence for centuries. Crocodiles and hippos move beneath the surface unseen, and rumors abound of bodies washed ashore mysteriously, of sudden disappearances, of strange lights dancing on the water during the hottest nights. Some speak of spirits bound to the river, watching, judging, or punishing transgressions. No villager steps near the water alone after dusk, and even daytime crossings are undertaken with caution, acknowledging the invisible presence of both danger and divine surveillance. Religious festivals punctuate the calendar, bringing both celebration and unease. Processions wind through streets, priests and devotees carrying sacred images and statues, drums beating rhythms that echo through the villages. People cheer and offer sacrifices, but the atmosphere is not entirely festive. Every participant is acutely aware that omission, disrespect, or misinterpretation of ritual could bring misfortune, even death. Secrets are exchanged in whispered warnings, hidden tensions simmer beneath smiles, and even those who appear devoted sometimes harbor private doubts. The spectacle of unity conceals the fragile web of fear, trust, and ambition binding the community together. Even children are initiated into this world of hidden meaning. They learn the proper gestures, the right words to call on gods, and the subtle codes that indicate respect or caution. Mistakes can lead to correction by elders, sometimes harsh, sometimes gentle, but always instructive. Stories of divine punishment, spirits, and ancestral ghosts are recounted not merely to entertain but to embed the rules of survival in the young. Every ordinary action is a rehearsal for understanding the unseen forces shaping their lives. And yet, within this dense tapestry of ritual and mystery, not all is explained or understood. Some ceremonies are known only to the initiated, some glyphs carved into temple walls are warnings rather than prayers, some offerings vanish inexplicably, leaving questions that stir unease. Even the priests cannot always interpret every sign, and even the pharaoh must rely on human advisors to navigate complexities that exceed mortal comprehension. Secrets accumulate like sediment along the riverbed, waiting to be uncovered, waiting to challenge assumptions about the balance of order, faith, and human ambition. As the sun sets, casting long shadows over the Nile and bathing villages in a golden haze, a quiet tension hangs in the air. Daily labor ends, meals are prepared, and lamps are lit, but the unseen mysteries of the day persist. Whispers of omens, unexplained events, and hidden dangers linger in every household, threading a subtle suspense through the ordinary. Each family, each individual, is a participant in an intricate interplay of faith, fear, and survival, their lives guided as much by invisible forces as by their own hands. And so the Nile continues its eternal flow, a silent witness to the lives of millions, a carrier of secrets both mundane and profound. Beneath its serene surface lies danger, knowledge, and mystery. Beneath the seeming order of daily life lie hidden stories of courage, despair, and quiet rebellion. Each ritual, each gesture, each whispered prayer contributes to a larger narrative that will eventually reveal the complexity of ancient Egyptian existence. And as night deepens, we are left with a question that haunts every observer: what truths remain concealed beneath the rituals of the river, the offerings of the temples, and the daily routines of a civilization both disciplined and enigmatic? The Nile's waters glisten under the early morning sun, a mirror to the sky, serene and endless, yet harboring secrets beneath its surface. To the ordinary Egyptian, the river is life itself, a source of sustenance, a highway for trade, and a symbol of divine order. But it is also a realm of uncertainty. Fishermen cast their nets with careful precision, wary of sudden whirlpools or the stealth of crocodiles lurking below. Farmers follow the rhythm of the floods, knowing that too little water means famine, and too much brings destruction. Every movement, every choice, carries weight, for in ancient Egypt, life and ritual were inseparable, and even the simplest act could hold hidden meaning. At sunrise, households begin their day with rituals both humble and profound. Families bow before statues of household gods, offering bread, oil, or small figurines as tokens of devotion. Children learn the gestures and words by heart, memorizing the sacred names and observing their elders' careful motions. To neglect a ritual, even unintentionally, is to risk divine disfavor, a subtle yet omnipresent tension threading through daily life. The repetition of these acts might seem ordinary, yet each prayer, each offering, is a bridge between the human and the divine, a negotiation with powers unseen but deeply felt. In the temples, rituals expand into grand displays of devotion and power. Priests, clad in flowing linen robes, move with solemn precision, chanting prayers that echo across stone halls carved with the images of gods and kings. Offerings of incense, precious oils, and freshly baked bread are meticulously arranged before sacred statues. The pharaoh, regarded as both king and god incarnate, participates in these ceremonies, yet even he is subject to their rules. A misstep, a mispronounced word, or a forgotten gesture could signify divine displeasure, and the consequences, real or symbolic, ripple through society. In this space, the sacred and the political intertwine, and tension permeates every gesture, every glance, every whisper. Even mundane tasks bear symbolic weight. Planting seeds, preparing meals, or shaping clay are all acts imbued with significance, guided by generations of knowledge passed down through oral traditions and carefully preserved texts. The rising waters of the Nile are not merely natural phenomena, they are divine messages. A flood in time brings prosperity, a miscalculation can signal misfortune. Craftsmen etch protective symbols into everyday objects, embedding prayers and charms to ward off illness, misfortune, or spiritual attack. In this culture, no act is trivial, and no moment is without consequence. Yet life is not entirely ordered. Unseen forces lurk at the edges of understanding, manifesting in illness, sudden accidents, and inexplicable events. When disease strikes, it is often attributed to spirits, the wrath of gods, or curses carried unknowingly. Healers and priests hold immense sway, their advice sought with reverence and fear. Families often hedge their bets with multiple remedies and rituals, blending medicinal knowledge with spiritual guidance, trying desperately to wrest control from the capricious forces surrounding them. In a world governed by both logic and superstition, survival demands constant vigilance. The Nile itself is a source of awe and anxiety. At night, the waters move with an almost sentient rhythm, hiding both sustenance and peril. Tales circulate of bodies found washed ashore, of strange lights flickering on the river in the darkest hours, and of spirits who roam the banks. Fishermen and villagers alike speak in hushed tones of these phenomena, wary of invoking the unseen. No one ventures too close to the river alone after dusk, and even daylight crossings are approached with caution, an acknowledgement that danger and divinity often occupy the same space. Festivals and religious ceremonies punctuate the year, blending joy with tension. Processions wind through villages and cities, drums beating a hypnotic rhythm as sacred images and statues are carried in ornate displays. People celebrate, offering sacrifices and prayers, yet beneath the surface lies an unspoken awareness of consequences. One misstep, one disrespectful act, could attract the gaze of the gods or offend powerful priests. Secrets are exchanged discreetly, warnings are whispered in shadows. In these moments of collective devotion, the underlying fragility of life and society is ever present, an invisible thread binding the community together. Children are carefully guided into this web of ritual and caution. They memorize prayers, observe gestures, and internalize rules meant to protect them. Tales of divine punishment and ancestral spirits serve both as instruction and warning. Every seemingly mundane action, sweeping a floor, carrying water, or lighting a lamp, becomes an opportunity to demonstrate respect, obedience, and awareness. In a culture so steeped in ritual, survival itself is a subtle form of mastery over uncertainty. And yet, Even those who are well versed in tradition cannot account for everything. Some rituals are secret, known only to the initiated. Some offerings disappear mysteriously, glyphs carved into walls hold warnings rather than blessings, and omens appear in ways that defy interpretation. Priests and pharaohs alike must navigate these uncertainties with care, relying on intuition, observation, and subtle guidance from advisors. Secrets accumulate like silt along the riverbed, hidden beneath the surface yet shaping every aspect of life in ways that remain invisible to outsiders. As evening falls and the last golden rays kiss the river, villages settle into a tense calm. Lamps flicker, children sleep, and elders murmur prayers into the night. The rhythms of daily life continue, yet the hidden mysteries remain, their presence felt even when unseen. Every gesture, every offering, every whispered prayer is part of a larger, unseen narrative, a narrative of power, fear, faith, and human resilience. The ordinary is inseparable from the extraordinary, and in these subtle intersections, the true essence of ancient Egyptian life reveals itself. Beneath the surface of daily ritual, behind every act of devotion, lie stories yet untold. The river flows on, timeless and secretive, carrying the lives, fears, and hopes of generations. It is in these quiet moments, between the routine and the ritual, the mundane and the mystical, that the real mysteries of life 4,000 years ago await, poised to reveal themselves to those willing to look beyond the obvious, to listen to the whispers, and to confront the unseen forces that shaped every heartbeat along the Nile. The shadow of death loomed over ancient Egypt with a presence as palpable as the sun that baked the Nile's banks. Life and death were not separate realms here, they existed in a fragile continuum, intertwined in ways both practical and profoundly spiritual. To die was not merely to cease breathing, but to enter a complex, meticulously orchestrated journey toward eternity, a journey that demanded preparation, ritual, and, often, secrecy. From the highest pharaoh to the humblest laborer, no one escaped the weight of mortality, and in this inevitability, human ambition, love, and fear found stark expression. Tombs rose from the earth like silent sentinels, monuments to memory and ambition. The grand pyramids that still awe the modern world were the culmination of centuries of knowledge, labor, and obsession, but for every magnificent tomb, countless smaller graves lay hidden in the sands, marking lives that history might have almost forgotten. Within these earthen or stone enclosures, bodies were prepared for eternity, wrapped and adorned with amulets and offerings designed to protect, nourish, and guide the deceased. The process of mummification was both a science and a ritual, blending chemistry, anatomy, and profound superstition. Skilled embalmers worked with precision, aware that one misstep could doom the soul, leaving it wandering, restless, or trapped. Among the living, fear and fascination intertwined with these practices. Families watched the preparation of their loved ones with solemn reverence, grief tempered by hope. They knew that the success of the rituals could determine the deceased's fate, and by extension, their own fortunes. A mislaid amulet, a forgotten chant, or a poorly folded linen could have consequences that extended far beyond the grave. The tension in these moments was almost unbearable, as life and death, duty and faith, hung in delicate balance. Yet the tombs themselves carried secrets that went far beyond their intended function. Some were designed to intimidate, to protect treasures and knowledge from the living. Narrow corridors, false doors, and hidden chambers created puzzles meant to confuse the uninitiated. Tomb robbers were a persistent threat, drawn by gold, jewelry, and sacred artifacts. Their thefts were not merely crimes against property but violations of cosmic order. Families and priests alike believed that looting could disturb the dead, anger the gods, and bring misfortune or death to the living. And so, tombs became arenas of tension even in death, their secrets fiercely guarded, their mysteries accumulating like shadows in the desert. The mummies themselves were more than preserved flesh, they were vessels of identity, carefully curated to maintain a connection between the material world and the afterlife. Each layer of linen, each amulet, each inscription carried intention. Pharaohs were entombed with the symbols of their rule, but even ordinary citizens received tokens of protection, figurines, small vessels of food and drink, and charms designed to sustain the soul. Death was a negotiation with eternity, a transaction in which preparation, precision, and faith were as vital as the lives that had just ended. In the quiet corridors of burial sites, the past and present coexisted. Echoes of chants and rituals could almost be heard if one listened closely. Stories of jealousy, revenge, and devotion whispered through the stone, hidden but persistent. Consider the laborers who died during the construction of these tombs, anonymous souls whose sweat and blood were embedded in the walls and foundations. Their deaths were often unrecorded, but their presence was undeniable, a haunting reminder that even monumental ambitions required sacrifice. The grandeur of the pyramids and tombs was built not only on knowledge and wealth but on human endurance, courage, and, sometimes, tragedy. Fear of the unknown permeated every aspect of death. Illnesses, sudden accidents, or unexplained phenomena were often interpreted as omens, divine warnings, or the consequences of failing to honor the gods properly. Families prepared rituals in advance, sometimes for years, to ensure that the deceased would reach the afterlife safely. Priests performed ceremonies with exacting care, chanting spells designed to ward off demons and guide souls through the perilous underworld. Yet uncertainty persisted. Even the most meticulous rituals could fail, and even the pharaohs, surrounded by wealth, knowledge, and devotion, were not immune to mortality's reach. Stories of vengeance and intrigue did not end with life. Some tombs became stages for posthumous conflicts, where curses, hidden inscriptions, or deliberately misleading passages were created to protect the dead and punish the living. Families occasionally vied for control over burial sites, disputes simmering in secrecy for years. The smallest miscalculation in the placement of an offering or a misinterpreted ritual could spark fear of divine reprisal, and whispers of such misfortune spread through communities like wildfire. In ancient Egypt, even death could not guarantee peace, it was a battleground of intention, belief, and memory. The afterlife itself was conceived as a perilous journey. The Book of the Dead, etched on papyrus and tomb walls, outlined the challenges that awaited the soul: judgment before Osiris, crossing dangerous waters, navigating labyrinthine corridors of the underworld. Each step demanded careful guidance and protection from spells and amulets. The living, aware of the risks, often invested tremendous resources in ensuring the deceased were equipped to meet these challenges. These preparations were both practical and symbolic, a reflection of a civilization acutely aware of mortality and determined to master it through ritual, cunning, and faith. And yet, amid all these careful preparations, human emotion persisted. Grief, longing, hope, and regret were etched in every action. Families mourned loudly or quietly, leaving traces of love in every offering, every whispered prayer. Laborers poured sweat into tomb construction, aware of their small but significant role in shaping eternity. Even in a civilization as ordered and ritual-bound as ancient Egypt, darkness lingered in corners where light could not reach. Crime was neither rare nor simple, and justice was a precarious balance between law, tradition, and the whims of those in power. Theft, deception, and violence haunted streets and villages, sometimes subtle, sometimes brutal, always a reminder that life, no matter how structured, carried risk. For the pharaoh and his officials, maintaining order was a delicate dance, one that required vigilance, cunning, and sometimes ruthless decision-making. Consider the marketplace, a place of bustling commerce, lively conversation, and constant scrutiny. Vendors shouted over one another, displaying their wares: grain, fish, pottery, woven cloth. Yet beneath this apparent chaos, every exchange was watched with suspicion. Coins might be swapped deceitfully, goods replaced surreptitiously, and alliances formed or betrayed in the blink of an eye. A merchant accused of fraud could face punishment not merely for the crime itself, but for disrupting the divine order that underpinned society. Justice, here, was entwined with morality and religion, and one misstep could be fatal. Crimes of greater consequence often carried heavier stakes. Murder, assault, and betrayal were treated as offenses against both the living and the gods. Investigations were meticulous and sometimes brutal, led by scribes, priests, or appointed officials who interpreted evidence according to law, custom, and divine guidance. Interrogations were relentless, confessions extracted through psychological pressure, appeals to fear, and the threat of punishment. Witnesses were called, oaths sworn, and each detail weighed with care. A single mistake could condemn the innocent or let the guilty go free. The shadow of death hung over every trial, a reminder that in ancient Egypt, the consequences of crime extended beyond mortal life. Even the pharaoh was not immune. Ambitious rivals, jealous advisors, and personal enemies plotted with patience and cunning. Poison, sabotage, and deception were tools of subtle warfare, employed not just to gain wealth but to shift power in ways that could alter the fate of entire dynasties. Palace intrigue often mirrored the streets, only amplified in scope and consequence. The smallest rumor could ignite paranoia, and one whispered accusation could cascade into arrests, executions, or exile. Power, it seemed, came at the cost of constant vigilance, and trust was a commodity rarer than gold. Among ordinary citizens, fear and cunning were equally vital. Theft of food, livestock, or property was not always a matter of greed, but of survival. Families made calculated decisions, sometimes skirting the law, sometimes bending it to their favor, knowing that misfortune could strike at any moment. Villagers relied on networks of trust, alliances that were as fragile as they were essential. A neighbor's betrayal could ruin a family, yet loyalty could secure protection and prosperity. In this world, morality was often fluid, shaped by circumstance and the ever-present shadow of authority. Punishment was both deterrent and spectacle. Flogging, forced labor, and even execution were used to reinforce social order. Tomb inscriptions and temple carvings occasionally depict crimes and consequences, reminders to all who passed by that misdeeds would not go unpunished. Yet justice was not blind, it was deeply human, colored by bias, ambition, and personal interest. Officials, priests, and pharaohs alike exercised discretion, sometimes bending the law to favor allies or settle personal scores. The line between justice and self-interest was blurred, leaving observers to wonder whether the law served order, power, or the whims of the mighty. But crime was not always a question of morality. Secrets were currency, and knowledge could be lethal. Laborers constructing tombs, scribes transcribing sacred texts, or advisors guarding state secrets all navigated a delicate balance. A misplaced word or careless act could expose someone to danger. Hidden knowledge, of treasure, of ritual, or of betrayal, had value beyond measure. The pursuit, concealment, and revelation of these secrets fueled tension in every stratum of society, from the narrow streets of villages to the echoing corridors of the palace. Some crimes were subtle, psychological, or strategic. Jealousy festered quietly, ambition simmered beneath polite smiles, grudges were nurtured in silence. Relationships became battlegrounds where deceit, manipulation, and cunning were as lethal as knives. A servant might conspire to elevate a master or sabotage a rival, a priest could exploit fear to gain influence, a spouse might manipulate inheritance, loyalty, or the attention of powerful figures. These quiet conflicts were invisible to most, yet their consequences rippled outward, altering lives in unexpected ways. Yet even amid fear, violence, and intrigue, human resilience persisted. Families, communities, and even criminals found ways to survive and navigate the complex web of law and superstition. Cleverness, loyalty, and adaptability became tools of survival, just as vital as strength or wealth. Stories of clever escape, reconciliation, or cunning maneuvering circulated among the people, whispered in marketplaces, recounted around hearths, and preserved in fragments of papyrus. Life in ancient Egypt demanded vigilance, intelligence, and courage in the face of a world where danger lurked in both the seen and unseen. As night descends over the Nile, the city falls into uneasy quiet. The river glimmers under the moonlight, reflecting both beauty and menace. Streets are emptied, tombs remain guarded, and whispers of misdeeds, both past and impending, drift through the air. In this civilization, the boundary between order and chaos is narrow, and the consequences of crime are intertwined with every aspect of life. Morality, law, superstition, and divine judgment all converge. The specter of danger persists, yet so does the quiet courage of those who navigate its shadows. Every action, every secret, every betrayal contributes to the intricate fabric of society. The desert sands of Egypt, golden and unending under the scorching sun, held more than secrets of eternity. They bore witness to acts of treachery and violence that would never be recorded on the walls of temples or the stones of pyramids. Beneath the grandeur and devotion of the pharaohs, life was far from orderly. Crime festered quietly, hidden behind the veneer of divine rule and pious devotion, preying on the vulnerable and the ambitious alike. Theft, murder, bribery, and betrayal were not anomalies but a part of the intricate social fabric, a shadowy undercurrent running alongside religious rituals and state politics. In the bustling markets of Memphis and Thebes, pickpockets and swindlers moved with surprising boldness, exploiting the chaos of daily life. Merchants, weary from navigating the crowded stalls and dealing with the unpredictability of river trade, often turned a blind eye to small thefts, knowing larger betrayals might be waiting closer to home. A seemingly innocuous quarrel between two grain merchants could escalate into a deadly feud, fueled by pride, greed, and the unyielding sun overhead. These minor acts of theft were merely a prelude to far darker schemes, the seeds of deception that would eventually reach the grand corridors of the pharaoh's palace. One case, documented in fragments on crumbling papyri discovered in a secluded tomb, provides a chilling glimpse into the high-stakes crimes of the era. A tomb, freshly built for a minor noble, had been robbed before the burial rites could be completed. Precious amulets, ceremonial weapons, and sacred scrolls vanished in the night, leaving the family devastated and the priests horrified. This was no ordinary theft. The precision and knowledge required suggested the involvement of insiders, those who understood the architecture of the tomb and the schedules of the guards. Suspicion fell upon the very officials who had sworn to protect these sacred spaces, and whispers of betrayal rippled through the city like the haunting echoes of a forbidden secret. The investigation into the tomb robbery was meticulous, painstakingly recorded by a scribe who had witnessed the aftermath. The scribe wrote of footprints in the sand, subtle marks in the stone, and objects out of place, details that would seem mundane to the untrained eye but carried clues to those familiar with the codes of secrecy and the craft of deception. Each discovery added tension, raising the stakes not only for the family who had lost their ancestral treasures but for the entire social order that depended on trust, piety, and hierarchy. Who could commit such a brazen act without punishment? How deep did the conspiracy run, and what forces were orchestrating it from the shadows? Among the prime suspects was a trusted official in the local administration, a man whose loyalty to the pharaoh and the gods was assumed but whose ambitions were whispered about in hushed tones. He had access to restricted knowledge, keys to hidden chambers, and the ability to manipulate the laborers and guards who stood watch. Some believed he acted alone, driven by greed or resentment, others feared a larger network existed, a clandestine web of thieves and conspirators stretching through the city's corridors of power. Every interrogation, every observation of subtle reactions and nervous glances, painted a portrait of tension so thick that even the air seemed charged with suspicion. The scribe noted that some servants had vanished mysteriously, leaving only cryptic messages behind, silent witnesses to the conspiracy unfolding beneath the sun-scorched stones. As the investigation deepened, the stakes grew higher. The noble family's grief became a public spectacle, drawing attention not only from citizens but from other officials and even the pharaoh's own advisors. What began as a private crime had transformed into a political powder keg. Rumors circulated that the theft was meant to destabilize the household, to undermine faith in the ruling class, or perhaps even to send a coded warning to higher powers. Each discovery was like a stone dropped into a still pond, sending concentric ripples of suspicion, fear, and paranoia outward in every direction. The scribe's meticulous records also revealed the human cost of such crimes. One servant, caught with a small amulet, was publicly interrogated and executed, a grim reminder of the harsh justice meted out to those who transgressed. Yet even as fear gripped the population, questions lingered: were the punished truly guilty, or were they scapegoats in a larger, more sinister plot? The ambiguity added to the suspense, leaving the scribe and the audience of history alike questioning the truth. It became clear that in this world, justice was not a matter of right or wrong, but of perception, power, and survival. Crime in ancient Egypt was not limited to material gain. Betrayal, both personal and political, carried consequences that could alter lives and destinies irrevocably. Rivalries among nobles often culminated in covert assassinations, poisonings, and manipulations that would never be recorded officially but left lasting scars on families and communities. A jealous courtier might spread rumors to destroy reputations, while a wronged priest might invoke a curse that haunted generations. Each act of betrayal was interwoven with daily life, feeding into the narrative that even the most sacred spaces were not immune to human frailty. The suspense of these criminal acts lay not only in the immediate threat but in the uncertainty that followed. Every missing artifact, every whispered accusation, every sudden disappearance became a piece of a puzzle that may never be fully solved. The desert sands, ever shifting, would eventually reclaim the evidence, burying secrets beneath layers of time, just as the Nile silently observed the unfolding dramas. The tension persisted because, in a world governed by divine oversight and rigid hierarchies, one could never truly know who was loyal and who was betraying. The stakes were not only the treasures or the status lost but the fragile trust that held entire communities together. Ultimately, the story of crime beneath the sand is a story of human ambition, desperation, and ingenuity. It is a reminder that even amidst the monumental achievements of ancient Egypt, the timeless struggle between morality and desire, law and transgression, survival and greed, shaped lives in ways both profound and tragic. The stolen amulets, the vanished servants, and the whispered plots serve as a haunting testament to the complexity of life in a civilization often viewed through the pristine lens of archaeology. Behind every pyramid, behind every temple, the shadows of intrigue lingered, and the question remained, who truly controlled the fate of the living, and the dead, in this ancient world? As the sun set over the desert, painting the sands in shades of blood and gold, the story of theft and betrayal was far from over. Secrets waited to be uncovered, alliances remained hidden, and the whispers of the past promised that justice, if it came at all, would arrive on its own inscrutable timetable. The tomb stood silent, a monument to both devotion and deceit, and the people of the city continued to move through their lives under the ever-watchful gaze of gods, and of men whose ambitions would not rest quietly in the shadows. The question lingered in the minds of all who dared to think, was this crime merely the act of desperate thieves, or a carefully orchestrated betrayal that would echo through generations? Women in ancient Egypt occupied a paradoxical space, one that balanced reverence, subtle power, and societal constraint. While the public eye often focused on pharaohs, scribes, and priests, women shaped the world from the shadows, their influence hidden in whispers, alliances, and quiet acts of strategy. Queens, priestesses, mothers, and wives wielded authority that was rarely recorded on stone but was felt in decisions that rippled across families, communities, and even the palace itself. Their lives were intertwined with both devotion and danger, a delicate dance where ambition could elevate or destroy them in equal measure. Among the most powerful of these figures was the Queen Mother, a woman whose counsel could shape the destiny of a pharaoh and determine the survival of a dynasty. Her influence was not wielded openly, it was embedded in the subtleties of conversation, in the careful orchestration of marriages, alliances, and patronage networks. She knew the ambitions of courtiers, the loyalties of priests, and the fragility of a ruler's favor. Her power lay not in swords or armies but in her ability to read human nature and manipulate the flow of information. Every whispered word in the palace could be a weapon, every smile a signal, every gift a subtle negotiation of power. Her story illustrates that survival in ancient Egypt required a keen mind as much as devotion to gods and king. Priestesses were another group whose influence was often underestimated by outsiders but was critical to the functioning of religious and political life. They interpreted omens, performed sacred rites, and controlled knowledge of rituals that could invoke protection, or curse, for individuals and families. In one compelling account, a high-ranking priestess noticed a discrepancy in the preparation of offerings to the gods. Her persistence in investigating the matter uncovered a hidden plot to redirect wealth intended for the temple into private hands. This discovery not only protected the sacred traditions but also elevated her status within the priesthood and the court. Her vigilance, patience, and intelligence highlight how women operated as both guardians of faith and subtle power brokers, navigating a landscape filled with intrigue and danger. The stories of women were also deeply personal, revealing their humanity beyond political maneuvering. Mothers struggled to protect their children from the harsh realities of life, disease, hunger, and social inequity. Some resorted to secret remedies, whispered prayers, and forbidden rituals in attempts to shield their loved ones from harm. Others took calculated risks to preserve their family's status, negotiating with officials or even confronting powerful figures when necessary. Each choice carried potential consequences. A misstep could mean scandal, exile, or even death. Yet in these quiet acts, women exercised an agency often overlooked by history, leaving traces that archaeologists and scribes would only piece together centuries later. Within the royal court, the subtle competition among women added tension that rivaled the political machinations of men. Concubines and queens often engaged in careful games of influence, seeking favor for themselves or their children. Letters, secret meetings, and coded messages served as tools of power, each carrying the potential to shift alliances or provoke deadly rivalries. One account recounts a queen secretly warning a young prince about a plot against his life. Her intervention, though unrecorded officially, may have altered the course of succession and prevented a catastrophe. Such stories demonstrate that the stakes for women were as high as for the pharaohs they served. A miscalculation could cost not only their position but the safety of their families and even the future of the dynasty itself. The emotional complexity of these women adds another layer to their narrative. Ambition coexisted with devotion, love intertwined with fear, and courage often masked vulnerability. In letters carved into tomb walls or hidden within private quarters, archaeologists have discovered personal expressions of grief, hope, and longing, revealing the inner lives of women navigating a world that demanded obedience while offering the possibility of subtle, transformative power. These intimate glimpses show that history is not solely the story of kings and battles, but also of those whose influence shaped events from behind closed doors. Even the seemingly mundane acts of women, managing households, overseeing education, or supervising temple offerings, had far-reaching implications. Decisions made quietly in domestic spaces could affect trade, labor, and religious ceremonies. A woman's judgment in matters of hospitality or alliance could cement political relationships or spark disputes. Each choice, while appearing trivial to outsiders, carried the weight of consequence, demonstrating that women's influence in ancient Egypt was pervasive, strategic, and often invisible. As the narrative unfolds, the audience begins to sense a web of intrigue stretching across generations. Alliances forged by women could save a dynasty, while rivalries could ignite crises. Their stories leave lingering questions. How much power could one woman wield without drawing fatal attention? Which decisions, hidden from the public eye, altered history in ways historians may never fully know? The suspense lies not in overt conflict but in the quiet, calculated moves that held immense stakes for survival, reputation, and legacy. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a sense of awe and curiosity. The women of ancient Egypt operated in a space that was at once constrained and immensely potent. Their influence, often unrecorded, shaped the political, spiritual, and social fabric of the civilization. The intrigue they navigated, the alliances they forged, and the dangers they faced provide a haunting reminder that power often thrives not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. The story lingers like a whisper through the corridors of history, a promise that behind every monumental achievement and every divine proclamation, there were women whose courage, intelligence, and subtle cunning ensured that life, ambition, and survival continued under the unforgiving desert sun. The monuments of ancient Egypt are more than stone and labor, they are silent chronicles of ambition, devotion, and mystery, etched into the landscape for eternity. From the colossal pyramids that rise like sunlit mountains to the intricately carved temples hidden along the Nile, every structure carries layers of purpose, meaning, and secrecy. Yet beneath the grandeur lies a world of hidden passages, concealed chambers, and deliberate designs meant to protect, to mystify, and, in some cases, to deceive. These architectural marvels were not only monuments to the gods and pharaohs but also repositories of secrets that few were allowed to witness. The construction of these monuments was itself a feat of ingenuity and human endurance. Laborers, artisans, and architects collaborated to move massive stones, align temples with celestial bodies, and inscribe sacred texts that encoded knowledge only a select few could read. Their work was guided not just by engineering skill but by religious precision, a belief that the alignment of each block, each wall, and each statue carried cosmic significance. A miscalculation could anger the gods, compromise the structure, or unravel carefully planned rituals. Among the builders, there were whispers of apprentices who discovered hidden passages or unusual markings and were sworn to secrecy, their knowledge a blend of awe, fear, and responsibility. Even the workers understood that their labor was more than physical, it was a participation in a complex web of spiritual and political power. Temples and tombs were constructed with meticulous attention to security, and yet, some of the most compelling stories emerge from the secrets embedded in their design. Hidden doors, false chambers, and trap-laden corridors were meant to mislead grave robbers and protect sacred relics, but they also sparked legends and intrigue that have endured for millennia. In one case, a small temple along the Nile contained a concealed passage that had gone unnoticed for centuries, only revealed by a careful study of the alignment of reliefs and the faint echo of a hollow wall. The discovery suggested that certain chambers were intentionally concealed not for decoration but for protection, holding objects, documents, and perhaps truths that were never meant to be seen by ordinary eyes. Each hidden space raised tantalizing questions: who designed it, and for what ultimate purpose? What secrets had been safeguarded behind these walls? Tombs, in particular, were elaborate theaters of secrecy and symbolism. Pharaohs and nobles commissioned tombs not only as resting places but as eternal embodiments of power and legacy. Every hieroglyph, every carving, every chamber was a carefully orchestrated message to the gods and the afterlife. Yet even within these sacred spaces, human ambition, fear, and deception left traces. Tomb robbers, priests, and insiders who sought to exploit vulnerabilities created an invisible layer of tension that transformed these structures from silent monuments into arenas of hidden drama. The stories of stolen amulets, altered inscriptions, and buried correspondence suggest that tombs were as much a battleground of human intrigue as they were sanctuaries for the dead. Among the most intriguing discoveries are chambers that appear to have been deliberately left unused or concealed entirely, a silent testimony to secrets too dangerous or sacred to reveal. Archaeologists have noted unusual architectural anomalies: walls that do not align with conventional plans, staircases leading nowhere, and false floors beneath burial chambers. Some theorists suggest these hidden spaces contained evidence of internal corruption, political plots, or forbidden religious texts. Others posit that they were intended as spiritual safeguards, places where the pharaoh's soul could rest without interference from mortal ambition. Each hypothesis adds layers of suspense and speculation, emphasizing that the grand monuments are not merely feats of engineering but enigmas designed to challenge, protect, and confound. The human element within these architectural marvels cannot be overstated. Artisans who engraved the walls and sculpted statues were both creators and keepers of knowledge, their work revealing glimpses of daily life, religious beliefs, and social hierarchies. Many left small personal marks: an offhand sketch, an unusually detailed relief of a servant or craftsman, or a subtle signature, reminders that even in monumental construction, individual lives and stories persisted. These traces create a sense of intimacy that contrasts sharply with the monumental scale, suggesting that behind every stone lay human hands guided by intellect, devotion, and, sometimes, fear. The audience begins to imagine these craftsmen moving silently through shadowed corridors, aware that one misstep might anger both pharaoh and deity, yet compelled to leave their mark on history. Suspense builds further when modern discoveries intersect with ancient designs. Archaeologists exploring previously unexcavated temples have uncovered secret rooms containing artifacts and scrolls that hint at political intrigue, forbidden knowledge, and even evidence of rivalries that threaten dynastic stability. One chamber, untouched for millennia, contains scrolls detailing internal court conflicts, suggesting that the pharaoh's advisors may have manipulated religious ceremonies for personal gain. Another tomb revealed evidence of tomb robbery at the highest levels, implicating trusted officials in betrayal. These finds confirm that the architecture itself was a silent witness to crime, ambition, and secrecy, echoing the human dramas that unfolded behind sacred walls. The alignment and orientation of temples and pyramids also play a role in suspenseful mystery. Oriented with celestial bodies, these structures reflect a deep understanding of astronomy and cosmology, but they may also encode messages or hidden pathways accessible only to the initiated. Scholars speculate that secret knowledge about the movement of stars, seasonal floods, or sacred rituals was embedded into the very stones, a code meant to guide only the worthy. The sense of anticipation is palpable. Each exploration might reveal a message, a treasure, or a truth long buried by sand, time, and deliberate concealment. By the end of this section, the audience is drawn into a world where architecture and secrecy are inseparable, where every temple and tomb is a narrative in stone, alive with the ambitions, fears, and ingenuity of those who built it. The monuments of ancient Egypt are not static relics, they are enigmatic characters in a sprawling story of human aspiration and divine reverence. Every hidden chamber, false corridor, and concealed inscription carries suspense, inviting the viewer to imagine the lives of those who dared to explore or exploit these spaces. The desert sands may reclaim the evidence, but the intrigue remains eternal, a haunting testament to a civilization where secrecy, power, and destiny were carved into stone itself. The question lingers, what still lies hidden beneath the sun-scorched monuments, waiting for discovery? Death in ancient Egypt was never simple. It was not an end, but a passage, a transition fraught with ritual, preparation, and mystery. Every act surrounding death was carefully orchestrated, not merely to honor the deceased but to secure a place in the afterlife and to maintain cosmic balance. The stories of those who lived, loved, and labored are preserved most vividly in the tombs, mummies, and funerary texts that have survived millennia, offering glimpses of a civilization obsessed with memory, legacy, and the delicate line between life and the unknown. Mummification, perhaps the most iconic practice of ancient Egyptian culture, was both art and science, requiring precision, patience, and profound spiritual belief. The process involved removing organs, drying the body with natron, and wrapping it meticulously, all while reciting prayers and spells to guide the soul safely into the next world. The preparation of a single body could take weeks, with priests and embalmers acting as intermediaries between the living and the divine. In one recorded case, a child's premature death became a test of skill, devotion, and compassion for the embalmer. Despite the best efforts, the child's fragile body resisted preservation, leaving the embalmers to improvise and adjust rituals to honor the soul while preserving the body. This intimate struggle humanizes the abstract, showing that even in a society dominated by gods and pharaohs, grief, hope, and desperation were deeply personal. Funerary customs extended beyond mummification, encompassing elaborate tomb designs, symbolic grave goods, and carefully inscribed texts. Families spared no expense, commissioning objects that they believed would provide comfort, protection, and sustenance in the afterlife. Personal letters, amulets, and even toys were buried alongside the deceased, revealing emotional dimensions rarely seen in official records. One nobleman's tomb contained small notes tucked into the layers of wrappings, messages to his children expressing love, regret, and instructions for maintaining family honor. These artifacts, silent across centuries, create a bridge between past and present, allowing modern observers to connect emotionally with lives lived thousands of years ago. The tension surrounding death was not merely spiritual, it was social and political. A pharaoh's death, for example, triggered intricate succession plans, rivalries, and conspiracies. Rival claimants could exploit grief or confusion, and families of nobles had to carefully navigate these transitions to protect their status. Tomb inscriptions occasionally hint at hidden disputes, subtle references to wronged heirs, disgraced officials, or warnings against betrayal. These messages were often encoded in allegory or symbolic imagery, designed to endure across time while concealing their full meaning from the uninitiated. Each discovery of a hidden text adds suspense, revealing that death was as much a stage for intrigue as a spiritual rite. Equally compelling are the narratives of ordinary Egyptians, whose deaths were not immortalized in pyramids but whose lives carried significance through the traces they left behind. A farmer who lived along the Nile may have had a small family tomb adorned with modest offerings and inscriptions. Yet even in these simple graves, the human story is vivid: the sorrow of a parent, the devotion of a spouse, the subtle assertion of identity in a world where survival often demanded anonymity. Archaeologists have uncovered skeletal remains with carefully placed personal items, and analysis of these graves reveals patterns of care, community, and ritual. Each discovery invites questions: how did these individuals perceive death? How did they hope to be remembered? And how much of their humanity survives beneath layers of sand and time? The study of mortality in ancient Egypt is also a study of fear and control. Epidemics, injuries, and accidents threatened life constantly, and funerary practices were in part a response to this fragility. Spells, amulets, and protective inscriptions were believed to guard against malevolent spirits and ensure safe passage into the afterlife. Yet despite these measures, death remained unpredictable, a constant tension woven into the fabric of daily life. Families and priests alike were forced to confront their powerlessness, negotiating rituals and offerings as if each action could sway fate itself. The suspense lies in the uncertainty: no matter the wealth, status, or preparation, the outcome was ultimately in the hands of unseen forces. The stories preserved in tombs and mummies are also layered with mystery and unanswered questions. Hidden chambers sometimes contained texts that contradicted official accounts, revealing scandals, secret alliances, or forbidden practices. In one discovery, a previously sealed tomb contained documents that hinted at a young noble's forbidden love, concealed political maneuverings, and even the theft of ritual objects from other tombs. These revelations illustrate that death, memory, and history are intertwined in complex ways, with each generation leaving traces that may illuminate or obscure the past. The suspense is sustained because, despite centuries of archaeological work, much remains hidden, and every excavation has the potential to rewrite the story. The emotional resonance of these discoveries is profound. Observing the care taken to honor the deceased, modern audiences can feel the same grief, reverence, and hope that the living must have experienced. The rituals reflect not only spiritual belief but an acknowledgement of human vulnerability, love, and ambition. In one poignant example, a tomb of a mother and child contained matching amulets, inscribed with prayers for protection, underscoring a bond that death could not sever. These intimate moments evoke empathy, connecting viewers across millennia, and reinforcing the idea that beneath the grandeur and ritual, ancient Egyptians shared profoundly human experiences of love, loss, and legacy. As the audience follows these narratives, the suspense intensifies. What remains undiscovered? How many personal stories are buried beneath layers of sand, hidden behind walls or lost in fragments of papyri? The tension is not only in the mystery of death but in the anticipation of revelation, the possibility that new discoveries could illuminate secrets that even the most detailed histories have overlooked. The living and the dead continue to intersect in the archaeological record, creating a narrative that is incomplete, enigmatic, and endlessly compelling. By the end of this section, it becomes clear that death in ancient Egypt was a story of preparation, devotion, suspense, and humanity. Tombs, mummies, and funerary objects were not merely static relics but vessels of emotion, intrigue, and memory. Every ritual, every artifact, and every inscription carries echoes of lives once lived, hopes once held, and fears once confronted. The haunting beauty of these practices lies in their complexity, the intertwining of devotion, secrecy, ambition, and love, and in the timeless question they leave for us: what truly survives when life ends, and what secrets remain hidden, waiting to be discovered beneath the sands of time?